Nebula might be the most modern game that Epoch has released for the Super Cassette Vision to this point. It's a shoot-'em-up in a style very similar to what you were seeing in arcades in 1984. No power-ups, but you have alternate attacks, stages with varying enemy patterns, and there's even some that could be considered bosses. Nebula is the final game in the Astro Wars series. After fending off Emperor Cruz's invasion in the first two games, and now you're taking the battle back to his homeworld. Nebula has 4 stages of shooting action, and the vast majority of what you encounter are going to be ground emplacements. Things below you that will shoot bombs up in a big arc. There are occasional formations of flying vessels, and if I counted correctly, there's 7 of those through the entire game. And if I miscounted, I'm probably going over rather than under. The right-hand button will fire your guns out ahead of you, while the left-hand button fires a missile. And missiles in Nebula are one of the best features in the game. As long as you hold down the left button, the missile keeps falling, and when you release it, then it shoots out ahead. That means you can use the missiles as bombs, get right over your target, and then press and hold it down until it falls on them, or you can guide it into targets that you don't want to be in front of. One of the big challenges in Nebula is that your ship isn't maneuverable at all. You're slow as molasses. Some enemies will fire rapidly, and you might think you'll be able to slip through a gap, but it's tighter than you realize. All of that just serves to make the missile more valuable. Also, your weapons auto-fire if you hold down the button, so no getting repetitive stress injuries with that terrible Super Cassette Vision controller. Most of the ground-based stations that you encounter can be destroyed in one hit if you hit the vulnerable part, otherwise you have to shoot them a lot. And since for many of these locations, that red bit is right on top, flying over them and dropping a missile straight down is the better approach. Except that also gives them time to fire back. You'll encounter 2 different kinds of shots in Nebula. The first are regular bullets like you'd be very familiar with in any shoot-'em-up. You get touched by them and you die. But the other ones make a big explosion when they're done, and if you get hit by that or have to fly through it, then your weapons get disabled. The effect will wear off after a few seconds, but this is a shoot-'em-up. You never want to not be shooting 'em up. One interesting technical trick that Nebula showcases are multiple layers of parallax scrolling. You'll encounter 3 levels of scrolling here, and the bands of scrolling will change size as you fly up and down. It works because all of the background graphics here are sprites. While that does give Nebula a little bit of choppiness in its scrolling as things pop in at the edge, it is a clever way to take advantage of the Super Cassette Vision's advanced sprite handling capabilities. On the first stage of Nebula, you're flying through an Egyptian-themed zone, passing over pyramids and shooting some pharaoh-looking guys. Stage 2 is very similar, but it has a desert landscape background. Stage 3 is where things start to change up as you're flying through a futuristic city. You'll have to shoot up some large buildings, which I imagine are either schools or hospitals. You're doing some kind of astro war crime here. Stage 3 introduces a boss enemy, a flying saucer that will come in and fire pretty rapidly at you. The missiles really help with that one. And then finally, on Stage 4, you'll fight all of your toughest foes, including this Tutankhamun-looking fellow, where you'll have to shoot all of the targets on him to shut him down. Complete that stage and the game loops, a little bit harder next time. There's 2 difficulty levels here, Amateur and Professional, and the difference is that on Professional mode, you start with fewer lives, and the enemies shoot more often. And that's really all there is to Nebula. It's still in the model of early shoot-'em-ups, where it's very simple. It's not a bad game, and it's actually a lot harder than I'm making it look here. Your ship's speed is so slow, it's very difficult to avoid anything. The big thing about Nebula is that the missiles are a fun twist on the shoot-'em-up formula. It gives you a different way to attack than you're used to. It's not the smoothest shoot-'em-up in the world. And unfortunately, Nebula hit right when the Famicom started to get a lot of horizontal shoot-'em-ups that might not have been spectacular games, but played a lot smoother than it. Maybe if Nebula had been out 6 months before this, it could have helped the Super Cassette Vision get established. As it stands, its place in history is too little, too late.